Hi, I'm Jim with Mountain West Sales, and I'm here today to answer some of our customers' most common fireplace questions. Let's start with wood stoves and wood inserts. The biggest pro for a wood stove or a wood insert is that if you have access to firewood that you can cut yourself, then your fuel is free. Or if you have access to inexpensive firewood, that can go a long way to helping you heat your home in the winter for a low cost. The other advantage to a wood stove is that they're very low maintenance. There are very few moving parts and pieces. And so for the long term, you can really use a wood stove for a long time without having to get into replacing lots of parts and pieces. So some of the cons to owning a wood stove. Well, you're gonna have to clean things. You're gonna have to maintain things. You're gonna have to clean glass. You're gonna have to scoop out ash. You're gonna have to take that ash and dispose of it somewhere. You're going to have to cut and stack your firewood. You're going to need a place to store that firewood where you can keep it away from critters and varmints and that sort of thing that will make a mess of it. There's really no way of getting around the fact that when you're burning a wood stove in your home, you're going to have a bit of a mess. The nature of a wood stove is we stoke it, we fill it with wood, we get a hot fire going, we naturally let that fire go to the end of its course, and then we're going to reload. And during that process, you're going to have these peaks and valleys of heating and cooling. The other con is if you are not at home, you're not going to be able to keep that wood stove going at an optimal rate at all times. So tends to be the case that if you work all day, you may come home to a cold home if you're heating with a wood stove and you need to get it going when you get home. That can be a drawback for some people. So the pros of a pellet stove or a pellet fireplace insert are related to the cons of a wood stove. The main advantage to a pellet stove is that you can run it thermostatically. So our pellet stoves, like from Quadrifire and Harman, for example, will have thermostat controls that you can set a temperature and the stove will turn itself on, bring the room to that temperature and maintain that temperature until you run out of pellets. So really all you have to do is keep the stove full of pellets and you have nice even heat, whether you're there or not. You can run a pellet stove when you're away at work, you can run it overnight. They're perfectly safe to do that. So another advantage of the pellet stove is that it's a little bit tidier than a wood stove. You're not bringing wood in and out of the house. The pellets are stored in plastic bags. The key to successfully owning and operating a pellet stove is regular maintenance. You have to keep them clean. One of the biggest mistakes that we see people making is just running the stove for a long period of time without doing the maintenance that's required. That would be like the daily cleaning that your manual is going to tell you about. If you do those things, the pellet stove can be great for you. The cons to a pellet stove, there are a lot of moving pieces and parts to a pellet stove. Every pellet stove has an auger that feeds the pellets into the burn pot. It has a combustion blower that feeds air in for the fire, a room air blower that pushes the warm air out into the room. All those parts and pieces are potentially a service issue. Again, if you keep up with the maintenance of your pellet stove, you're going to reduce the possibility that you'll have those problems. But it's a machine, it has parts, and eventually those parts are going to break down. Another disadvantage to pellet stoves can be finding pellets. They're plentiful usually during the heating season. You can find them at the big box stores. You can find them here at Mountain West Sales. Out of season in other places, not Mountain West Sales, it may be hard to find pellets. And then if for any reason there's a scarcity of pellets, that can happen, then you have problems finding fuel. So that can be an issue. All right, so the pros of a gas stove, fireplace, insert, or fireplace. Gas requires the least maintenance of any of the fuel sources, whether that's wood or pellet. There are few moving parts in a gas stove or insert that you have to worry about. And most of our products, like from Heatilator, Heat and Glow, Quadrifire, Vermont Castings, those are going to have direct spark ignition. So in the old days, you had a standing pilot in a gas fireplace. That was something you had to maintain. You had to know how to turn it on at the beginning of the season, turn it off at the end of the season. A lot of people were uncomfortable with that. But the new technology is a direct spark ignition so that when you turn the appliance on, the pilot lights, the main burners light, and when you shut it off, everything shuts off. Natural gas, if you happen to be on natural gas, is a very inexpensive fuel source per hour to operate versus pellets if you're buying those, or wood if you're buying wood. So it can be cheap to operate a gas fireplace. And then I would say the number one pro is convenience. There is no waiting time from the time you press a button to start the fire to when the fire lights, as you would have with a pellet stove or a wood stove. It's just on when you want it and off when you want it. Another pro is that you can operate these thermostatically like you can with the pellet stove. So you can set a temperature on your control and the fireplace or the stove will turn on, light itself, maintain that temperature, and turn off when it needs to. So a lot of pros to gas appliances. Cons to gas appliances, I would say number one is that you are depending on something else for your fuel source. None of us are able to procure our own natural gas, so we're depending on the gas company to get that to us. So if you're trying for some kind of energy independence or you want to have a secondary fuel source that doesn't depend on those things, gas isn't going to be the way to go. Another disadvantage to gas can be if you are on propane. If you're in an area that does not have natural gas, propane can be expensive to operate per hour. And so that's really where we see a lot of customers tending toward pellet or wood to get away from burning propane. So another disadvantage to gas stoves and fireplaces is that there is usually a lower limit to the heating capacity that they have. The biggest gas fireplaces and stoves that you will find will usually top out at about 50,000 BTUs. So here in New Mexico, in our area, that's going to be around 2,000 square feet. You can do larger appliances that go up to say 70,000 BTUs in pellet or wood. So if you're looking for something that's you're going to try to heat the largest area possible, sometimes gas isn't the way to go. All right, I hope that was helpful to you. Gave you some information to be able to make the decision between a gas, wood, or pellet fireplace, stove, or insert. If you have more questions, we would be happy to help you at Mountain West Sales.